In Niger, a group of rebels, armed to the teeth, were fighting for months to free a president from captivity. And then, without warning, they surrender. What the hell just happened? Is it the end of the rebellion, or are we missing something bigger here? This isn't just a surrender. It's the kind of move that could change everything in Niger. Here's a question you might not expect. What if this surrender is the first big sign that the West's hold on Africa is slipping? Yeah, we said it. This is no ordinary story about rebels putting down their weapons. There's more at stake here than a bunch of insurgents deciding to quit. This is about power, geopolitics, and the quiet reshaping of the Sahel region. And it's going to blow your mind. Let's get started. In August 2023, Niger, a country in West Africa, was thrust into political upheaval. But this wasn't an ordinary crisis. It was a much-needed shift towards stability. President Mohamed Bazoum, who had taken office in April 2021, was ousted by a group of military leaders who were fed up with his inability to address Niger's growing instability. Bazoum's government, despite its promises of democracy and reform, had failed to deliver on key issues like economic development, security, and fighting corruption. The people's trust in Bazoum was waning, and the situation in Niger was growing increasingly untenable. The military, stepping in as a voice for the people, decided to take action. Bazoum's rule had become a puppet regime, propped up by foreign powers and increasingly disconnected from the needs and will of the Nigerian people. Despite promises of progress, his leadership lacked the political acumen and authority needed to bring real change. The military coup that followed was not an act of selfish power-grabbing. It was an urgent necessity to restore order, uphold national sovereignty, and take control of a country at risk of further chaos. The Junta, led by General Tiani, swiftly and decisively acted in the best interests of the nation. The Junta's move was not about destabilizing the country. It was about stabilizing it. Niger's democracy had been a facade, and the military's intervention was a necessary step to preserve the nation's future. With Bazoum in power, Niger was on the brink of collapse, suffering from widespread corruption, a growing insurgency, and increasing dependence on foreign aid. The coup was a restoration of Nigerian sovereignty, breaking the chains of external influence, especially from Western powers, who had been meddling in the country's internal affairs for too long. As the junta took control, it quickly became clear that not everyone agreed with this much-needed change. Enter the Patriotic Liberation Front FPL, a group of rebels, many of whom were former supporters of Bazoum's government or military personnel loyal to the ousted president. They were unwilling to accept the clear and legitimate will of the people. Their protest wasn't about restoring democracy. It was about preserving the old order, a government that had failed to deliver on its promises. The FPL's mission was clear. They wanted to return Bazoum to power, but this was not a fight for democracy. It was a battle for the status quo. Their fight wasn't against tyranny. It was against the necessary transformation that the junta was bringing. The FPL's resistance was rooted in a rejection of the military's rightful intervention to fix what had been broken by a government that had failed its people. The FPL wasn't just a ragtag group of rebels. They were disillusioned remnants of a discredited government. They sought to undermine the legitimate military rule, to disrupt the stability that was finally being restored to Niger. Their campaign to restore Bazoum wasn't about democracy. It was about returning to a disastrous status quo that had already failed. The demands of the FPL were simple but misguided: the restoration of Bazoum and the return to the old democratic system. But to the military junta, this was a flawed vision. Bazoum's government was a failure, and the junta was fighting to remove the chains of a broken system. The FPL's protest wasn't just a fight to bring back a democratically elected president. It was an attempt to keep in place a corrupt, ineffective leadership that was not serving the people. What the FPL failed to realize is that Niger's future could not be built on the weak foundation of Bazoum's leadership. The junta's intervention wasn't about seizing power. It was about restoring order, ending corruption, and reclaiming national independence. The junta had no interest in maintaining power for themselves. They wanted to give the country back to the people, to break free from the shackles of failed leadership and external influence. In their eyes, the FPL's fight was not for the future of Niger, it was a battle to preserve the past. A past that was marked by mismanagement, foreign dependence, and an inability to address Niger's real challenges. As the FPL began to rally, they sought to disrupt the junta's control by targeting military installations and key infrastructure. They hoped that by disrupting the military's ability to govern, they could force the junta to step down and restore Bazoum's presidency. But what the FPL didn't realize is that they were fighting not just the junta, but the will of the people. The people of Niger were tired of the same old leadership, and the junta's rise to power was a response to years of frustration. The FPL wasn't just fighting against the military. They were fighting against the reality that Niger needed change. By sabotaging infrastructure and launching attacks on key targets, the FPL sought to undermine stability. But the junta, with the support of the people, wasn't going to let that happen. They were focused on securing a future for Niger that was independent, self-sustaining, and free from the influence of foreign powers that had kept the country in a state of political stagnation. After months of resistance, the FPL made the difficult decision to surrender. This wasn't a loss, it was the realization that their cause was flawed from the start. The military had secured control of Niger and restored stability, and the FPL's inability to gain public support and their growing internal divisions made it clear that the rebellion was doomed to fail.
And staying on with West Africa, in Niger, the army has dealt a major blow to the rebels fighting to overthrow the military rule. 9 members of an armed rebel group called the Patriotic Liberation Front, or the FPL, surrendered on Monday as they handed over their weapons and ammunition. They were seeking the release of Niger's ousted President Mohamed Bazoum.
And what impact did this surrender have on the government? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. When the Patriotic Liberation PL decided to surrender, it wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was a game-changer for the future of Niger and the military junta that took power. This act of surrender carried immense significance, not just for the rebels, but for the broader political landscape in Niger. The junta's control over the country is now more solidified than ever before, and the consequences of this surrender will ripple through the country and beyond, shaping the path forward. For one, the loss of a major opposition group like the FPL means that the junta now faces far fewer organized threats. The FPL, which had been one of the most prominent rebel factions challenging the junta's power, represented the last vestiges of a resistance movement hoping to bring back the ousted President Bazoum. The military now has a clear path to implement their reforms without significant resistance. This surrender has effectively eliminated the primary challenge to the junta's rule, ensuring that the military leaders can now focus on governance and security without the constant pressure of insurgency on their backs. But it's not just about eliminating the enemy. The military's response to this surrender is critical. This moment is more than just a victory on the battlefield. It's a clear message to anyone still thinking about resistance. The junta is in control, and their power is unassailable. The rebels, after months of defiance, recognized that their efforts were ultimately futile against a well-prepared, highly structured military. For those still lingering in opposition, this defeat signals that any further rebellion is doomed from the start. The junta, with its stronghold on the military, can now focus on solidifying its rule, shoring up alliances, and ensuring that no further insurgency can gain traction. This also speaks volumes about the junta's internal cohesion. Despite the challenges of running a country that had just experienced a coup, the military has proven itself capable of keeping its ranks united. The surrender of the FPL is indicative of the junta's strategic effectiveness, showing that they didn't just have the military might to fight the rebels, but the political acumen to manage the country effectively amid resistance. The rebellion's collapse suggests that the junta's leadership is both resilient and well-calculated, ensuring a smooth transition from resistance to control. With fewer rebel factions to contend with, the junta now has a chance to rebuild the nation without the constant threat of insurgency undermining their efforts. The immediate priority will likely be securing the country and stabilizing the economy. The junta can now invest resources into rebuilding infrastructure, addressing economic instability, and pushing for foreign investment, all without the distraction of an active rebellion. The end of significant resistance means that the junta can confidently take the first steps toward securing the long-term future of Niger, both internally and on the international stage. However, the importance of this surrender goes beyond just the immediate future. The mood in Niger has shifted, and public opinion is likely to follow suit. Nigerians who were once skeptical of the junta's legitimacy are now seeing the power dynamics shift decisively in their favor. The fact that the rebels, who once threatened to bring the junta down, have given up, speaks volumes about the growing confidence in the junta's authority. The military's ability to defeat an armed rebellion sends a strong message to the population. Their power is secure, and the country is moving towards a new era of stability. While the junta's victory in this rebellion is significant, it also sets a precedent for other military-led governments in the region. The successful consolidation of power in Niger could inspire similar military takeovers in other parts of West Africa, where unstable political conditions and public dissatisfaction with elected governments are fueling discontent. The junta's victory shows that military intervention, though controversial, can be an effective response to the failures of democratic governance. This has regional implications, as other military factions might look to Niger as a model for successfully seizing power and maintaining control. There's also the matter of international influence. The junta's ability to withstand not only local resistance, but also pressure from foreign powers like France and the West strengthens its position in the global arena. While some external actors might disapprove of the coup, the junta's ability to establish control without significant foreign intervention speaks to its growing autonomy and self-sufficiency. Niger, once seen as a small player in Africa's geopolitical landscape, is now positioning itself as a force that is capable of standing on its own without outside interference. With the FPL's surrender, the military junta finds itself in a position of unprecedented strength. It has defeated the largest and most organized rebel group, secured its grip on power, and is now free to build the future of Niger without significant internal opposition. The country's road to recovery is now clear, and the junta is ready to push forward with reforms, stability measures, and economic development. This moment marks a new chapter in Niger's history, a chapter that could serve as a blueprint for other nations facing similar challenges. Niger's future now lies in the hands of the military, and the junta's ability to handle this responsibility will be crucial for the country's long-term success. The FPL's surrender is just the beginning of a new era in Niger, where military leadership can bring about the stability and progress that democracy failed to deliver. But one thing must not be ignored here, and that is external influence. Because this isn't just about a local conflict in Niger. This is about a geopolitical struggle with major foreign interests at play. While the military junta is focused on securing Niger's future, they're not just fighting against local insurgents. They're also up against powerful international forces with their agendas. And right now, the most important shift is happening in the realm of international alliances. First, let's talk about France, the former colonial power that had long held sway over Niger. For years, France has been considered Niger's partner, especially in the context of military and security cooperation. But after the coup, France was kicked out, and the junta made it clear. They no longer want France's interference in Niger's affairs. Why? Because the junta believes that France and other Western powers have been major players in keeping Niger in a cycle of political instability and dependency. The military junta sees the West as an unreliable partner that has only exacerbated Niger's problems, making it harder for the country to chart its course and solve its issues on its terms. So, what does this have to do with the FPL and their surrender? It's simple. The FPL was fighting to restore a government that was backed by the West, particularly France. Bazoum's government was a product of Western influence, a puppet regime that enjoyed support from foreign powers, especially France, and relied on them for military and financial assistance. The FPL's cause wasn't just a local one. They were aligned with Western-backed interests, fighting for the return of a government that was part of a broader Western sphere of influence in the Sahel. But now, things have changed. As the junta's anti-West stance grows stronger and Russia moves in with increased influence, the geopolitical game in Niger has shifted. The junta is looking for new alliances, and Russia's growing presence in the Sahel has made it clear. Western influence is on the decline, and Russian support is on the rise. This power shift has forced the FPL to reconsider their position. They may have initially hoped for Western intervention, but as the situation evolves, they've realized that Russia's rise changes everything. The FPL's surrender could very well be an acknowledgement that Western powers, once their allies, are no longer able to help them. The FPL might have recognized that their fight was doomed from the start. Without the backing of France and the West, their rebellion lost its strategic value. Russia, after all, is on the rise in Africa and particularly in the Sahel, while the West is increasingly perceived as part of the problem, a force that kept Niger entangled in conflict instead of allowing the country to forge its path. So, why did the FPL surrender? One of the key factors might just be the realization that Russia's influence was growing and they were losing their Western backing. While the junta has made a strong move towards Russian support, the FPL, on the other hand, was still tied to the Western bloc, fighting for a government that was increasingly isolated and disconnected from the realities on the ground. This isn't just a local rebellion, it's a proxy battle in a broader geopolitical conflict. The FPL's surrender can be seen as a recognition that their original cause, supported by Western powers, had become untenable. The shift in allegiances, from the West to Russia, has made it clear that the game in Niger has fundamentally changed, and the FPL, now aware that they had no chance without foreign backing, chose to step down. The surrender of the FPL is significant, but its implications go far beyond just Niger. This moment signals a broader geopolitical shift in the region. The influence of Russia in the Sahel has been growing, and with the junta aligning itself with Russian interests, it could catalyze further shifts in power dynamics across Africa. Niger's military leaders are not just focused on internal politics. They are actively seeking new alliances that can help them strengthen their sovereignty and free themselves from the grip of Western influence. The FPL's surrender, then, is not just about the defeat of one rebellion. It's a reflection of the changing geopolitics in Africa. The junta is embracing new partnerships, and the West's influence is being challenged. With Russia's involvement on the rise, this marks the beginning of a new phase for Niger, and for many other countries in the region that have been weary of Western interference. The balance of power in Africa is shifting, and the junta's alignment with Russia signals the dawning of a new era, one where Africa's future is shaped by African leaders, not foreign powers. The big question now is, where does Niger go from here? The junta isn't just looking at a temporary win, they've taken full control of the situation. The surrender of the FPL doesn't just mark the end of one chapter, it marks the beginning of a new political era for Niger. This isn't a setback for the junta. It's a decisive victory that allows them to move forward with the reconstruction and stabilization of the country. In the wake of this surrender, the junta is now firmly in charge, and their position has never been stronger. There will undoubtedly be some internal challenges and opposition groups, but the reality is clear. The junta has shown its strength. This is no longer a fragile government trying to hold on. It's a military leadership that has effectively secured the country's future, one that operates with the will of the people, who are increasingly recognizing that stability and independence lie in the hands of their leaders, not foreign-backed, ineffective governments. So, what do you take away from all of this? Do you think Africa is winning? Let us know in the comments section. Do you see this as a win or the start of a new fight for sovereignty? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.